Right, okay then everyone, it's time for me to attempt to put this knight here into more of a pose on its base. How I'm going to approach doing this is I've got some corkboard. In fact, it's to be very precise about this, it's what's it called? I can't remember now. Kind of thing you put your pans on. I've used this in the past, so I really like this stuff. What I'm going to try and do is I'm basically going to have one leg down and then the other leg kind of raised up on some, to suggest that it's on some kind of platform. Basically then to give myself a pose that's not just the standard pose. So that means that to begin with, oddly enough, I've got to finish securing this leg in place because it's going to be pretty much the main support leg. So first things first, to get this on together. Okay. Now, what I'm going to have to start doing is kind of getting some of this off. Do you know what I really love doing with this? Sometimes it's just snapping the stuff, because when you snap it, you get sometimes a far better break than if you were to cut. You can see where I've cut that one in the past, and it's, you know, doesn't look as good to my mind. Right, what I'm going to have to do as well is think about how I want this. So it's all about working out, among other things, where your hips are going, how the rear leg is going to be posed, and how high up I need to put this to get that bracing appearance. So it looks to me, to begin with, that setting one of these feet would be a very good idea. Now, again, I want to feel like this is being braced, and the knight will be kind of leaning back into it to some extent, which would probably require that kind of positioning. So the only problem with that is it feels like if I have that locked in using its normal pivot, if you do it perfectly straight, yeah, it's great, but I want to kind of feel like there's actually force being applied to it. Wrong way. Now, to do that, that hip's quite far back, and again, I don't really want that hip to be very far back, so I'm going to have to do a bit of cutting on that as well. Okay, so it's pretty obvious though to me now that this foot is going to be happily flat on the ground, which means I can now attach these feet without really thinking too much. If I put that around the right way, no, I haven't. Now, you'll notice that I'm not building up the board and securing the board straight away. And the reason behind that is I need to make sure that this foot is in the right position to begin with. You can see this is quite a large foot. And I've got to not just think about the shape of this cork, I've also got to think about how it's going to taper down later on towards the floor. So we're going to have this, we're going to have this. Again, I've got that quite well placed. Having this deliberately arcing backwards a bit. Just make sure that actually glues on. So this is going to look like it's kind of braced and leaning into the back of it So there are other things I've got to consider about this, like making sure the pistons don't go in the wrong way, and then of course this is going to be then quite rows up. Again, I've got to think about all of these things when I'm actually deciding exactly where to place every single part, what to cut from, you know, what to cut off in a lot of ways. Helps if I'm putting this the right way around as well, doesn't it? There we go. Yeah. So what you got to remember as well is this thing is going to be up and then pulled downwards. Again, I've got to think about how that's going to fit as well to be braced upwards. So all of these things genuinely, you know, they matter an awful lot when you're planning these things. I think what I need to do now is I need to get this kind of secured in here. You've got to think of all of these things as you're doing it. So sort of crazy in a lot of ways. And of course we've got our pistons. You've got to make sure that your pistons aren't too long or aren't too short, so that, you know, you've got the right distance. You know, that basically you've got to make sure that the pistons don't end up too long or too short. They actually fit as they should do. Now, with this part being the longest part, and again, you can see we're going to have a point here where the armour plating is going to interact. So we've got to make sure that when that shin goes on, it's not going to have a problem, basically. They are quite a large shin plate though, so I can't imagine it's going to have a problem, but you just got to think, is it going to scratch into the wrong place? I'll just get one of the Horus ones out quickly. Still haven't decided this is who this knight's going to be siding with. But there we go, you can see, so we've got a lot of clearance there. We don't really need to worry too much at this stage, you know, about whether or not the parts are going to all go together right. Okay, so there we go. This foot is coming together nicely now. Okay. This is where I can again start thinking to myself, well, okay, how does this part go in here? Now, I feel that that is too far back, and I don't feel like it should be forward like that either. So basically it feels too far. It looks like it's pointing downwards. However, when we think about this on top of it as well, so if I were to get that facing like that and facing that way, it starts to actually kind of make some sense that it's slightly tilted. So I'm not going to have a problem with that being like that. But again, the other thing I have to consider here, give me a second, is this part, which is another hinge underneath here. So let me just find the right hinge for that. Just got to remember which way round it goes as well. just making sure that when it's positioned in, it's not going to be completely off. No, it should be fine. So that's starting to come together now. Don't quite want to glue into the base yet. Okay, now time to start thinking about the positioning of this one. So it's got to be raised, but I'm also conscious about over raising it and making it look a bit too high up. I really would rather prefer it be straighter and then more pointing down. Now, in order to do that, there's no other way to put it. I have to cut that part off there because that little hook pretty much locks it in a particular position. Now I have freedom to choose my lock point for this leg. There we go. So I've got the freedom to move it now. But even then, you've got to think about where's like naturally sensible for this in positioning. Okay. So what I'm going to have to do here is I'm also going to have to cut these parts off. Because again, these create a very specific locking position for the leg. Ooh, where's my scraping tool? Okay. Now, there we go. So now I've got a bit of freedom about how I'm going to position this. And I want it to kind of feel like it's bracing for a shot. So I do want it more up, but not very high up. So probably more in this kind of position. Again, issue with that as well. Oopsie-doo. Go back on, shall I? Is really thinking about how the foot will settle as well, and the piston here. The piston there is another major sticking point about positioning this kind of model. So what I'm going to do is I should now be able to put glue on this. Then I should still have the ability to freely move this as I need as I go along. Of course, there is another part to think about too, just to add complication, and that is the cabling that I believe goes from here to there. But hopefully that's not going to be a major issue because they're kind of in the right place. Now, what I can do is, now that I've got that, I can just kind of pop a little bit more of this cork board. You can see I'm not definitely determining the position of my cork board yet. All I'm doing is using it to give myself a height, an idea of height and kind of where I need to put this foot to. It's better that I leave this free for now so that later on I've got a bit more control. There. So yeah, I just got a bit of freedom there. It also gives me an idea of how much I need to build up this cork as well to actually create a platform for this. Even everything from what position I'm going to put the foot in as well is going to effectively be dictated by this now. Now, it's actually, in particular, this is a tiny bit higher than the cork board, and I'm doing that on purpose because once I've stacked up the cork board, I'll cover it in some other either like thick textured paint or things like that. So the foot does need to have a little bit of height more than the cork. And the same goes again, I gotta get this in. No. Let's hope this one isn't too tight. This will tell me whether or not this foot's in a good position as well. Right, okay, yeah, it does actually work. That's great. Let's see. Let me just double check. Yep, that's doing good. Put the other two supports on now. That was good, wasn't it? The problem with stuff like this, you plan things and then you have to pick them up and move them around, and then stuff like that happens to wind you up. Shall I? Stay as you're supposed to. Oh man, do what you need to do, man. Stop wiggling. Driving me crazy. Stop wiggling, stop wiggling. Right, look at that. It's like, oh, come on. Look at that. It's good, but it's slightly, just ever so slightly too long to fit there. Just try that slowly. See, this is the problem now. When you try stuff like this, you've got to mess around with lots of other little things along the way. This is going to try and kill me, isn't it? This thing is just going to be a hard part where I have to make sure this piston fits before I let it dry fully. And I've also got to be mindful. This is going to be a pain now, isn't it? Don't mess me up. Don't mess me up. I think what I might have to do is add a bit of glue in there, just so that it stops the piston part sliding out constantly. It will add a bit of grip. These parts, they are sent to try me, aren't they? Stay. Yes, there we go. Right, now we're going to see if this has actually worked. So, I mean, sometimes you have to really start checking every single point is as it should be. Damn it, this thing just wants to come out, doesn't it? Go and stay where I have told you to stay. It wants to kill me, this. It wants to actually drive my sanity to the very edge before destroying me forever, doesn't it? It's not that it's not able to do it, it's just unfortunately when I start moving it to make sure that it's all held as I want it to, it then kind of slips easily, unfortunately. Come on, you can do it. Hold both points as I do this part. Come on. Yes. Done it. Just about. There we go. It's done what I wanted. And it's gone in. And it stayed. Gosh, that was hard. That was a hard bit, wasn't it? But it's worked. Yeah, I've got that right where I want it now. Not happy because the glue's kind of smudged along a bit more than I would want. But I can tidy that up later. I've lost one of my foot cups doing this, haven't I? Now give this the opportunity to set. Just making sure I'm all happy with that, and then what I can do is I can think about that and then that along there. So that it's kind of looking along the right way. Angle the body a bit more. I want it to kind of feel slightly. Let me show you now. Oop, you can have a look at how dirty my desk is at the moment. What we've got right now is I'm trying to secure this, twist everything around to show you how it looks. There we go. No, that's not how we go. Goodness. Okay, so you can see, hopefully, I know this is going to turn the video kind of at an angle. Oh, I'll do it. There we go. That's how. It's probably at a funny angle now on the recording, but there we go. That's how I want it to look. So it's got a twist, it's aiming down the leg, and that's it. That's how I want it to be. Of course, I've still got a huge amount of more work to do because I've still got to do the arms and everything else, but at least I'm happy with its positioning and posing. So I'm going to leave it at that. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.